The following program is sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Welcome to About Money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments, surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared in the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
Well, welcome. We are going to be talking about money because it's Saturday, it's noon, and there's so much to talk about. You know, it's going to be 121 months of uninterrupted growth with the end of the month of July. That has never happened since we've been recording economic growth. Going back to 1854, there's never been a period of time that's 121 months long where economic growth has continued during that entire time. That's 10 years. 10 years in a month. That's never happened. But we're there now. So there's a lot of wishy-washiness now. Many people are waiting for the end to come. And you get the feeling after 10 years, there'll be an end to it someday. Although there are some people that say, we may never see the end of it in our lifetime. I'm not one of those that believe that. I believe there will be an end, and I have talked about the end and my probabilities for an end. But I believe there's still a ways to go. I believe we're going to continue for months to go on and continue to set records. But at the same time, I'm not at all surprised at the doom and gloomers. That's not something new. That's just the way things happen when you've been going on a record number of months for GDP. Doom and gloomers, and they've been around for a long time. Think about it. Thomas Robert Malthus, an economist, 1766 to 1834. He was an English scholar. He was an economist. He was an expert on population, and he believed that improvements in agricultural productivity could not go on forever, that they'd reached a peak. This is in the 1830s and 1820s, and it was going to result in a limit of food. When the population grows faster than the food supply, he said, wages go down. The advantage of famines and epidemics and wars were to the advantage of the population because it reduced population growth. He was all for celibacy and marriage late in life because we'd reached a maximum time of agricultural productivity. And he argued against the so-called poor laws, those things that we would consider as Social Security and Medicare. He said, food stamps, that sort of thing, that shouldn't be passed by the English Parliament because that just reduced the death rate. It's better to have people dying. That was in the 1830s. If you look back at the U.S. in 1850, soon after the death of Malthus, about 50% of the population of the U.S. was employed on the farms. 23 million was the population of the U.S. 11 million were employed on the farms. So almost 50% of the entire population of the U.S. was living on the farms or employed on the farms. Today, there's fewer than 1 million employed on the farms. Fewer than 1 million farmers employed on the farms. And we're producing between 600 and 700 times what was produced in 1850. He couldn't foresee when he said agricultural productivity had reached a maximum and there was not going to be any improvements and there were going to be food shortages. He never saw the advent of tractors and combines, of milking parlors, of all the things that have happened in the agricultural industry. But, a more recent example was John Kenneth Galbraith. He wrote the book, The Affluent Society in 1958, The New Industrial State, 1967. He said American standards had risen to as high as they were going to rise to. After all, in 1958, the average home size was 1,100 square feet. You know, who needed a bigger house? That was the maximum. Almost every family had a car. You know, that was as good as it was going to get. They had a phone and they had a radio, and a few people had TVs. And the fact is that in 1958, according to Galbraith, the large corporations owned 2/3 of the output in the key sectors. They were there was a technostructure that belonged to the big companies. They controlled all technology, and small companies would not have the capital and would not have the ability to compete with the large companies. The large companies were able to take all the risk because they had the control. And they didn't need to take a lot of risk because they had control. The objectives of the large companies were not to maximize profits, but to maintain their organization and control. The large organizations were controlled by labor contracts, and they had control over suppliers, and they had political influence. They were going to continue to dominate, according to Galbraith. There was no room for small companies, or very little. You know, when you think about it, one of those small companies in 1966, just the year before the new industrial state was produced, was a little company called McDonald's. Even though they had the big companies in 1958, according to Galbraith, would dominate the markets, there'd be little room for companies that were small, because the big companies, the Eastman Kodaks, the Allied Chemicals, the Goodyear, Bethlehem Steel, the Chryslers, Corn Products, International Harvester, Johns Manville, Sears, United Aircraft, Texas Corporation, and Union Carbide, those were the big corporations that controlled everything that was going on. You know, there wasn't much room for small companies. They wouldn't do very much. But when you think about it, you know, there was a little Seattle software company that was to grow up called Microsoft. And out of the University of California, San Francisco, out of the biology department, there was a little company that was formed to deal with microbiology and biotechnology called Genentech. Not only Microsoft, but Apple, Cisco, Home Depot, Intel, McDonald's, Nike, Verizon, Visa, Walmart, all of those that are part of the Dow today, those companies were little tiny companies. They're not even born when Galbraith wrote his book. They were to come later. And the companies that he thought controlled, Eastman Kodak, they're gone. Allied Chemical, Bethlehem Steel, Chrysler, Corn Products, International Harvester is around, but John Manville isn't. Sears is a skeleton of what it was. United Aircraft is gone. That's not United Airlines, that's United Aircraft. Texas Corporation, Union Carbide, those companies that were supposed to control and be in charge of all technology, be in charge of organization, they're all gone. You know, of course, houses. Who has a house that's 1,100 square feet anymore? I mean, the average size of the U.S. house is 2,500 square feet. Living standards have tripled or quadrupled. The average one-car family back in 1958 now has 3 cars. And they have many other standards. You know, it's not just happening in America, it's happened worldwide. Think about China. Today, from the time of Galbraith's time, there's between 200 and 300 million fewer people living in poverty. Maybe it's even greater today. But you know, you don't have to go far back as Galbraith even, because one of the top gurus today, considered doom and gloomers, is Robert Gordon out of Northwestern University. I call him the new Malthus. He claims that there were 3 cycles, and he's written a couple books on it. 3 cycles from 1750 to 1830. It was a cycle driven by steam engines and cotton spinning and railroads, and that was a huge innovative growth period of time. 1870 to 1900, the second cycle, electricity, the internal combustion engine, running water, which is probably the most important of the three. And then from 1960 to the 1990s, the computer came. But since 1990, innovation has slowed down. And he says we're entering a time of slow innovation, of slow productivity, slow growth. We're headed toward a time when we're going to beginning to go backward, not forward. And he has a significant following. Negativity continues to sell. It sold during Malthus' time. It sold during Gilbert's time. It's selling during Gordon's time. Negativity, paint a negative picture. Well, we're coming to a commercial break. We're going to look at that in a little more detail when we come back after commercial break. You also want to hear what my guest has to say. He's got a lot of interesting things. And we're going to maintain this subject, keep going on, not on the negative side, but what's wrong with all these approaches? That's coming later in the program. So don't go away. I believe we're just beginning to enter the most exciting time of our lives. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Don't go away. We've got so much to talk about and so many areas to talk about. We're probably not going to get to it all today. Stay with me. We'll get to what we can. Don't go away. We've got more to come.
More about money coming up with Mike Adams on AM 1590, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I've been talking about the doom and gloomers. The times are slowing down. The things are not going to work out. Going back to Malthus in the early 1800s, end of the 1700s, early 1800s, Galbraith during the 1950s, 1960s, and now the new things are not going to get any better. They're going to get worse type of guy, Robert Gordon out of Northwestern University. The idea is that things can slow down. But is that going to happen? They were all negative in saying we'd reached a peak in innovation, and that peak was going to go away, and maybe we were going to see a contraction in the economy. But if you look at what's happening, the global economy is evolving very, very rapidly. You know that over half the people in this world now have access to and are using the internet. Over half the people in this world are using the internet. That puts them in touch with everyone. You can have a student in Kenya that's taking a college class in the U.S. by never leaving Kenya. Taking a college class in California. Taking a math class. You can have engineers in India doing engineering work for people in the U.S. You can have U.S. engineers or engineers, doctors collaborating with doctors in Paris. I mean, think of the possibilities that there are. Real-time collaboration. McKinsey did a report back in 2007, and I realize that's really old and it's outdated. But even in 2007, company leaders in industries were changing 3 times faster in 2007 than they were 30 years prior to that. And if you did a study today, I would guess that it's changing even faster than that. When things are changing slowly, big companies dominate. Big banks control the funds, and they dominate financial decision-making. But when changes happen more rapidly, it's the small companies that rise to the top. You think about the changes that have gone on just in the past 10 years. I like to say, remember the time when a cloud was something in the sky? When it was birds that tweeted? When apps were something you filled out for a job? when you wanted a job? You know, those are terms that have come to represent something completely different. We've moved into different times, and the impact on the economy and on business and how we live and on how we invest. And it didn't just happen. It's probably been part of the new super cycle. I talk about the super cycle every 3 months or so. I'll continue to talk about it. You know, small companies create 60% of the 66% of the jobs worldwide. Small companies account for 85% of economic growth now. You know, it's not the large companies that are controlling economic growth. It's the small companies. VC-backed companies. Those are companies that were small companies that have gotten venture capital. They account for 82% of R&D today. I mean, and some of those VC companies are now pretty large. I mean, a number of those VC-backed companies are now part of the Dow. Large companies tend to make improvements in existing products, whereas innovative companies make disruptive technologies, unexpectedly displacing existing technology. Think about it. The two largest taxi cab companies in the world do not own a single taxi cab, and they didn't exist 10 years ago. The biggest hotel chain in the world does not own a single hotel room. That's a company that didn't exist 10 years ago. The biggest media company does not own any media content. That's a company that has come into existence in the last 10 or so years. World has changed. And for all of Gordon's predictions that we went through this period of time when we had certain inventions which made a huge difference, we have things going on today that are disruptive and changing what's happening. Disruptive change can be a big success and then a big flop. Think about it this way. It took Microsoft 14 years to go from zero to $1 billion in revenues. It took eBay and Facebook 7 years to go from zero to $1 billion. It took Zynga 4 years to go from zero to 1 billion. And then, just almost as fast as it grew, it flopped. Now Zynga's on the way back, but it illustrates what can go on. I remember having my PDA, my personal digital assistant. PDA, that's what they called them in those days. It was a Palm. It had a little stylus to write on it. You had to learn the stylus language in order to use your PDA. It was a phone, and you could write on it, you know. Palm came, and it was disruptive to the mobile phone business, and it created a mobile phone business. And then came BlackBerry with actually a keyboard on this small little phone, and you could read your emails on the BlackBerry. And that essentially doomed the Palm. But what really doomed Palm was the next iteration called the iPhone. And that doomed both BlackBerry and Palm. And today, even though Apple is probably one of the most profitable companies in the world and the iPhone continues to be purchased, the biggest phone companies are not Apple anymore. Android is overtaken the Apple format. Doesn't mean Apple's not doing well, but it means things are changing. Things happen. William Norhaus of Yale said that 70% of the goods and services that were produced in 2000 did not exist in 1900. And my guess is that 70% of the goods and services in 2060 that we will use don't exist today. So there's a huge impact on wealth and the creation of wealth. Galbraith thought that the 1950s we had reached the maximum of affluence. We can look back at Malthus and we can look back at Galbraith and say, this is what they predicted, this is what really turned out. It's early on Gordon. Nobody can say for sure if he's right or wrong. You can say, I don't think he's going to be right, and I don't believe he's going to be right, but I can't say for certain. We can say for certain Malthus was wrong. We can say Galbraith was wrong. a few years ago, in the last few years, they've talked, and the politics have talked about the rich have gotten richer and the middle class has taken the brunt of the things. There's two aspects to that. The middle class has shrunk some because a number of the middle class have moved into the upper class. I mean, it's not just that the middle class has been stagnant. A lot of the middle class has moved up. It's not just income which has gone up, but prices have come down. Think about it. Think about the computers and what they used to cost. I can remember buying my first business computer. I bought a computer for home that had 60 megabytes of memory and a computer for the business that had 100 megabytes of memory. And I was convinced that I would never ever have to buy another computer because I bought the maximum size of memory you could buy. And a couple years later, my computer slowed down and I called an IT guy. He came in and he said, "You're out of memory." And I said, "It's impossible. I have 100 megabytes of hard drive. 100 megabytes. How could it be out of memory?" He said, "You're out of memory." So we installed 300 megabytes of more memory, and I ran out of memory then too. Think about it. The cell phone that I carry in my pocket has such a greater hard drive, a sense, than my computer did in those days. And computers these days cost less than they did in those days. Our phones, cars. When I grew up, we didn't have air conditioning in the cars. I can remember making a trip in the summertime. We had this thing we hung on the window. You filled it with ice water, and driving down the road when the temperature outside was 100 degrees, I mean, the thing lasted maybe 17 seconds where you had cool air, and then it just allowed warm air to blow into the car. Today, almost all cars have air conditioning. They have power steering and power brakes. That didn't exist back in the 50s, back when Galbraith was writing. Back in the 50s or 60s, people went out to eat for very special occasions. Weddings, for big birthdays, the 25th, the 21st, the 50th birthday. People went out to eat. They didn't go out to eat a couple times a week. They went out to eat once every 3 months. Today we go out much more. Clothes, kitchen microwaves, televisions. Think about it. When my parents bought a color TV, it was 4 feet long. It was 3 feet wide. It cost as much as a 40 or 50-inch flat screen costs today. And their income was a whole lot less. In those days, you could buy a TV with a 3-year contract because it usually took you 3 years to pay off the TV. Things have changed. Not only have incomes risen, and they may not have risen as much as we'd like them to rise, but the cost of living has been increasing. Malthus didn't see that happening. Galbraith didn't see that happening, but that's what's happening. So for investors, that's having a tremendous impact on where we're going. We're going to come back to that after this commercial break, and we are coming to a commercial break, and this session has gone a lot longer than expected. So I do want to get to my guest right after the commercial break. Then we'll pick up this thought again. But you want to hear what my guest has to say, because that's an innovation that's also come in the last few years. Don't go away. We've got a lot more to cover. Stay with me through this time.
More about money coming up with Mike Adams on AM 1590, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So welcome back. When I get on a topic, sometimes I just start talking and never slow down. So I wasn't very organized to get through everything I had to get through. But I want to get to my guest today because it's important to hear. My guest today is James Kimmel of Epic Seats. Welcome to the program, James.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Mike.
So why don't we start with your background?
Absolutely. I'm born and raised in Seattle area and went to the University of Washington, where I was placed in an internship at the broadcast partner for the Seattle Mariners, my favorite team growing up. Got to spend some time in the broadcast booth with radio legends, Dave Niehaus, Rick Riz, Dave Henderson, Ron Fairley. And that was a dream come true. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. There might be a way to make a living and be involved in something that I'm so passionate about. And that was my first taste of sports marketing and sports business. And I really made that my goal. How would I get into this industry? What's the best way to approach it? And thought long and hard about it. And had a good friend that was doing similar things. He was working for the Chicago Blackhawks, and he saw the writing on the wall. You could either work your way up slowly from an entry-level minimum wage position and hope to have a decent paying job in year 2, 3, or 4, or you could go out and start your own thing. And he was very entrepreneurial and is today. And so we struck out on our own with Epic Seats and started in 2003.
So tell us about Epic Seats.
So Epic Seats is a reseller of tickets. We have relationships with season ticket holders that can't use all of their seats. We have relationships with teams directly. My role in the company is working directly with organizations and teams and venues, helping them understand their secondary market, because a lot of teams and venues don't know exactly what's going on with the ticket once they sell it. There's a lot of value in the resale and the second time around on your ticket. So if you have a strong secondary market, a team is more likely to retain their season ticket holders. You're going to renew your ticket, Mike, if you know that you can sell it on StubHub or on one of the resale sites.
So let's go back a ways, because this is an area which has dramatically changed in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, the people that were reselling tickets were standing outside the ballpark. Some of them were being arrested because it was illegal to sell your tickets in the secondary market. That was what existed 20 years ago. So that's changed dramatically. Talk to me about how that change has taken place and what's going on today. Let's get us up to date.
Absolutely. So when we got into the business, it was illegal to resell tickets within the Seattle area. So we incorporated at my business partner's parents' home outside of the city limits. And we didn't have an office in Seattle until 2005, when the rule was overturned. The Seattle City Council threw it out and said, okay, actually at the request of the Mariners, because they were taking some heat for partnering with StubHub and having resale tickets on their website. And people said, well, can they do this? This is against the law. This is the Seattle Mariners. They're reselling tickets on their own site. And they said, well, we're getting a piece of this action. We don't want to give it up. Let's get rid of that law. And the law really, quite frankly, was ridiculous, because people want a means to capture that value from their ticket if they can't go. It's really imagining your season ticket like your airline ticket, where you have to commit to a date and a time and a place, and if you don't go, non-refundable. Sorry, Mike, you had a family emergency and you can't go to the ballpark tonight. Well, now the secondary market provides liquidity for you and gives you a chance to recoup your investment, or at least some of it.
So I remember another issue, which is an issue with the companies that are selling tickets in the first place. I was chairman of the board of Seattle Theater Group, and I remember when we had Prince perform at the Paramount, and the minimum cost for a seat was $176. When those tickets went on sale, they were sold out within 12 seconds. So that obviously that was not individuals that were buying tickets. It was bots that were coming in, computer algorithms that were coming in and purchasing all the tickets for a resale.
Yeah, bots are definitely an issue in the industry, and there's a supply problem, because you only have so many tickets you can sell if you're the Paramount for that print show, and how many tens of thousands of people would like to be in that 3,000 seat venue. The bots, thankfully, are being prosecuted. There's legislation that's gone through most of the United States, and there's laws introduced in almost all states in the union. Washington was at the forefront of this and has prosecuted against those folks that decide to use computer algorithms to bypass and unfairly buy tickets, which it's certainly a terrible experience when you, the fan, want to buy tickets to a show, you get online and it's gone before you even know it. What I would argue is that even without bots there's still so much pent-up demand for some of these events that it's hard for anyone to get it, even without computers that you're chasing against. That said, I spoke in Olympia supporting that bill, and I want a fair playing field for the distribution of tickets. And Ticketmaster and some of the primary market has thought long and hard about this. They're trying to figure out how to give access, but they also have a lot of different people that they are working with. The promoters have their cut of the house. The artists want to have some. The fan clubs get some. The credit card deal with American Express gives you access to tickets. So by the time it's all chopped up, you might only see 15%, 20% of the venue going on sale to the general public, especially, and even less if you're talking about the Seattle Seahawks, for instance, where they have a 99% renewal rate on their season tickets because everybody that owns a Seahawk ticket knows they can resell it if they don't make it. They wouldn't have those kind of renewal rates if no one wanted to go and the team was losing every year. But with a winning program that everyone wants to be a part of, you see that strong secondary market and that strong demand. So they only have so many tickets they can put out there on their individual on sale.
So let's talk about the secondary market, because that's what you do, and you can give us some insight into what goes on.
Yeah.
So I took us on a couple different tangents, but now let's come back and talk about Epic Seats. Let's talk about the others that are doing the secondary sales.
Yeah, we really believe strongly that our role is to put people to see the live entertainment that they desire. So it all starts with a fan, a customer, someone that's interested in a sports property or interested in a particular artist, or someone that's just visiting the city for the first time and they want to experience a ballpark. We love those stories of people that come from out of town and say, wow, I was blown away. CenturyLink is such a great place to see a football game. And I'm especially interested in hearing that they're having a good experience. You know, I try to say hello and welcome to the away fans because that experience resonates with people. If they go and have a bad time, then you aren't going to come back to that stadium, and you aren't going to come back and purchase tickets from Epic Seats. So really, the secondary market plays a very important role. What our company does is connect buyers and sellers. And a lot of that is a traditional broker model where someone comes to me and says, James, I'm looking to go to an event for a company outing. Can you help me find some Diamond Club seats? And I say, okay, how many do you need? I need 12. Well, you can't go online and find 12 Diamond Club seats together, but I can go through my contact list on my phone and send messages out to the 20 or 30 people I know that own Diamond Club seats and see if we can find those tickets and go out and deliver something to that customer that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to get.
But you didn't, that's where you are today, but you got there in a kind of circular way, because there's a problem in the algorithms for the secondary sellers, right? Or there was.
Well, I think you could look at it like the stock market. You have unlimited opportunity to buy and sell your stocks in between a certain time period. So these are more like options, right? So the option expires. Once that game is underway, then there's no more market. But in that time period from the announcement or the on sale until it kicks off, you have so many different chances to buy and sell. And you have to be somewhat predictive. You also have to be aware of the patterns that exist. When it's sunny in Seattle on a Friday night, people still want to go to the Mariners game. Doesn't matter what their record is. So we see the markets tend to go up for those games. They go down for other games. The midweek game might slowly kind of fade. So for us, we're constantly trading, and we treat it like a stock and an option.
So most people have heard of StubHub, but not Epic Seats. What's special about Epic Seats?
So we sell through all the different secondary channels, and we actually use technology to help us list our tickets in real time across all multiple marketplaces, all the ones you've heard of. But the customer does best when they buy from the source. So cut out layers of markup and middlemen, and then you'll do better. So for us, our strong suit with our consumers are the tickets that we own, or we have relationships with consignment customers who own them outright. So all the local stuff in the Pacific Northwest, we have great access for concerts, theater, and then a lot of stuff out of this market too.
We're going to come right back after commercial, finish this. I'm going to let you know how you can access Epic Seats. So don't go away. We'll be right back. It's something that's really helped a lot of sports venues, performing venues. It's been a very positive thing. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
More about money coming up with Mike Adams on AM 1590, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I'm here with James Kimmel of Epic Seats. So tell us how we would get a hold of Epic Seats and what would we do if we got there?
EpicSeats.com is the best place to find us, Mike. And we've been in business for over 16 years. We're A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau, have stellar Yelp reviews. We wouldn't be around this long if we didn't take care of people. And really, for me, that's the most important thing, is making sure our customer service is top notch. A lot of people have had bad experiences out there. And so we want to make sure that they feel like they are listened to, we find what they're looking for, and we help them find the best ticket for their budget.
The website again is
www.epicseats.com.
That's great. So use them. It's well worthwhile. So I want to finish up what I started with, but I want to take you back to 1987. I was just getting started in my financial career. I went to a biotech conference. It was sponsored by P. Weber. And it was controversial at the time because it wasn't given much credence by the financial industries, by the pharmaceutical companies, especially by the established companies and the analysts. The main analyst at P. Weber took a chart and drew on that chart, actually, the curve for a company that showed a 12% compounded return on investment over a long period of time. And he said, this is the chart of Merck. And why would you want to invest in biotech companies when you have companies like Merck? Biotech drugs are injectables, and there had only been one injectable drug that had achieved $1 billion in sales. So the markets were going to be relatively small, relatively tiny. Who thought that they might be any larger? The best place to invest, according to the main analyst at P. Weber, was the big pharmaceutical companies. He had that view, the same view as Gordon, as did Galbraith. You know, there were 8 companies that presented, and I don't remember all that presented. I remember that Genentech presented on human necrosis factor. Genentech had human growth hormone before that. Centocor talked about monoclonal antibodies. Cetus presented. Amgen presented. And it was the only one I understood because they were talking about a product called Epogen, erythropoietin, that increased the number of red blood cells. And they had done a clinical trial where people were 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off. So the control group was off erythropoietin, the treatment group was on, and they saw an increase in red blood cells. And they had targeted kidney dialysis patients, and they had a cost benefit. Actually, I did the cost benefit. It cost Amgen, for example, $100 to produce the product. They sold it for $1,000, and it saved 10,000. It was a tremendous savings. But the only one that I really understood was Amgen. So that's the only stock that I did. And there were contrasting views. There was the traditional view and the big company analyst who said, all this stuff is new and it's not going to go very far. Well, those companies that had injectable drugs became the biotech industry. The large pharmaceutical companies have been doing drug discovery in the same way for almost 100 years, going back to Fleming, who discovered penicillin. Same kind of discovery mechanism, been highly automated. Fleming was dealing with one product. The big companies now could do 13 million, or had an inventory of 13 million different substances to test drugs against. And they had automated the whole process. It was very efficient and very effective, but it wasn't dealing with the real underlying DNA. In 1965, something happened to change what was going on in the pharmaceutical industry. I remember seeing the cover of Time magazine, and it had the double helix, the DNA, and a picture of Watson and Crick. They had the picture of the DNA molecule. And I looked at that picture, and I was pretty dumb and stupid at the time because they said, so what? So what? Well, that so what is worth trillions of dollars because that would lead to biotechnology. By 1973, Cohen and Boyer out of the University of San Francisco had shown the way to use recombinant DNA, and they were beginning, and they birthed genetic engineering. Insulin was a very small and very well understood protein at the time. And so this group began a company called Genentech, and they began to make synthetic insulin. They would license it to Eli Lilly and finance it through Eli Lilly, but they began to make synthetic insulin. And they began to work on another product that was more complicated called human growth hormone. And from there, tumor necrosis factor. Monoclonal antibodies were the second area where biotech began to move. They were fusing a myeloma cell with an antibody-producing cell. A myeloma cell that had lost their own ability to produce antibodies was being connected to a virus cell. And they began to manipulate molecules. Aguirre came along. And if you can picture what a molecule is, think of a string of beads that's twisted into all different shapes. Well, not only are the beads important, but the way it was twisted was important. Aguirre came along and said, we want to duplicate how molecules are twisted. That's what began to change from trial and error to a focus on discovery and manipulation of molecules. That exists today. Genes, for example, are something which are molecules, and that discovery process is going on today. Back not that long ago, I went to a luncheon where Lee Hartwell was, Nobel Prize winner from the Fred Hutch, and he determined what he had to say was trying to figure out what genes do is like trying to look at a company with 45,000 employees and writing a job description for each one of those 45,000 employees when you can only see the company from the outside and only see it when a person is absent and see the impact on the company. A lot of things went wrong in the early days, but that's been perfected. People are beginning to do it. Things are moving so fast. Think about viruses. Viruses do damage to the body. They enter into a cell. They use the cell's own machinery to replicate themselves, to grow, usually killing the host cell. But those newly formed viruses go on to other host cells and continue the process. And they do that because they share the same genetic code as the host cell. Just think of what happens if you can change the code of the host and or the virus to disable the virus. That's beginning to happen today. Regenesis is a book that's written on how synthetic biology is changing everything. And it's happening everywhere. In 2005, Mohawk Industries introduced Smart Strand, a carpet. It was based on a bioengineered petroleum product. And they've replaced a portion of what they're doing in rugs with something that has been genetically manufactured. That's just one of the examples of so many. That's why Gordon is wrong when he talks about we've reached the end of innovation. There's so much more coming, and there's so many opportunities for investment. And I've just talked on one small part of industry. There's so many other industries that are changing, so many companies that are coming. We're living in a time of tremendous discovery and innovation and disruption. I'll talk more about that as we go on. I told you we had too much to get to today. Have to wait until next week to hear the rest of the story. Until then, if it's Saturday, we will be talking about money.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today, or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you'd like Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again next Saturday at noon for more About Money with Mike Adams here on AM 1590. The Answer. The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial